Hey, Denny Grimes here. It's time for scripts and survival for a C19 environment. And listen, sounds like C19 is coming back. And you would think just because we got through the elections and COVID was looking better, we might be getting fewer and fewer objections. However, I think now towards the end of the year, we're going to be getting some other objections like COVID, like holidays, like New Year's, what's going on with the election. So you know what? We always have to be on our toes. So thanks so much for being here. Today is basically we're going to be covering 3 or 4 different objections you might be getting between now and the holidays, now and the end of the year. And also I want you to make sure you mark your calendars because over the next 2 Tuesdays, we're going to be meeting same time, 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock on our script practice. And also on the Thursday call from 1 to 2 Eastern, I'm going to be teaching the black belt class that to the bold group, which you have access to. And if you want to make sure you get invited, just make sure you send me an email at dennydelivers@gmail.com. It was a good email address to use. So I am just making sure here that I'm coming through. Awesome. You can hear me. So again, if you're new on the class, what we always want to do is follow the formula. Never forget the formula, which is acknowledge, isolate. That's going to unload, then unpack the groceries, right? We're going to make sure we isolate, then we're going to answer, and then we're going to close. So let's talk in terms of, and if somebody wants to chat in there, something they're dealing with, or even mic up, I feel like I'm in a closet because no one's talking to me today. So I trust my speakers are working, or you can put in the chat, maybe something you're dealing with. I know that as we get closer to the end of the year, you're going to get more and more people that want to wait because of the holidays. And so I'm happy to role play who would be a partner with me and allow me to take about 10 minutes and walk through this as a buyer or seller. And we want to wait until after the holidays. Is there anybody out there that would do that? And
I'll do it, Denny.
Or we can hear you. Okay, so I don't know why that is.
I don't think you can hear anybody.
Sonny, this is kind of interesting. I'll make lemonade out of this because you guys are on here and I don't know why we're having an audio issue. However, let's go forward with that. So if somebody basically comes to you and says, I want to wait until after the holidays, the first thing obviously is to acknowledge, I understand. Now, write this down if you haven't written it down already, is that if you don't know what they mean by their terms, their definitions or whatever, why don't you ask for some clarity? I find that when people are nervous and they're new into this, they get a little bit nervous and they're afraid to ask the right kind of question. So when they say, I want to wait until after the holidays, the logical questions would be, what holidays are you referring to? So if somebody basically said, I want to wait until after the holidays, I would basically say, awesome. What holiday are you referring to? And let's say they say, well, Christmas. Then the challenge then would be, the next step would be then to isolate that. I understand, other than waiting till Christmas, is there any other reason why you wouldn't want to move forward today with listing or selling? It works both ways so far. And they may say something, let's just assume that they say, no, I just want to wait until after Christmas. So basically then for clarity, what does after Christmas mean? Does it mean the 26th? Are they really talking about after the first of the year? So why don't you get some clarity about that? So are you saying then, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that you are available for your home to be shown the day after Christmas? Is that what you're saying? And they may say yes or no, or most likely they probably won't say that because, and you know what? The other thing you want to find out is what is it about Christmas that is holding you back? Well, I've got company coming in. I've got my house decorated. I got my house torn apart. We're wrapping presents, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you get to that point, it's going to be other than that. You know, other than the fact you have company coming over, is there any other reason why you wouldn't want to have your home on the market now? And let's face it, guys. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. Is it a safe assumption to basically make is that no major changes in the market will take place in the short run? What's the short run? How about in the next 24 hours? Probably not. How about the next week? Maybe not. How about between now and Christmas? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns out there as far as the COVID and the election still. I mean, the counting of the votes or certifying the votes, however you want to classify it. However, there's always
Regresamos a la
a
oficina del
risk.
sheriff.
And so, well, let's just take the seller side of it just for a moment. So, Mr. and Ms. Seller, so you want to wait until after Christmas. Are you saying after Christmas or after the holidays or after New Year's? Let's just say after New Year's. Okay, then what point in time would you like to have your home active for the majority of the population? Now, why would I say that? It's because I want to hold back a card. I want to hold back a card to say, listen, if you could basically, if there were a buyer out there right now that was serious and motivated, that would give you the number you would want on your property, would you want that buyer to know about it? Now, what's interesting is this, is that they may say yes or they may say no. If they say no, you can dig a little bit deeper on that. And then probably the only route I would go, and I'm doing this because I don't have anybody right now to role play with, is I would probably say, okay, so are you okay that basically if the market gets shut down, if COVID shuts down our market for the next 30, 60, 90 days, and maybe over the next 3 weeks, it would be the best time for you to sell. Will you be okay with waiting? Because there is a cost of them waiting. Does that not make sense? Most likely, if you deal with a seller that has a motivation, they want to move somewhere. Again, they have the motivation to move. Most sellers that are rational will allow you to at least say, I tell you what, I know you don't want, I'm assuming you don't want a ton of people through. Is that what I hear you saying? Yes, that's what I'm saying. Well, what if you only could show it, we could show it one time? Would that be okay? Now is a perfect time, you guys, to be talking and having these conversations with sellers. Why? They're probably, if they're going to decorate, they may not have their decorations up yet. And you may be able to go in there and get photography done ahead of all that, right? And so that would be a sense of urgency. Say, well, I'll tell you what, if we can get your photography scheduled now, before you have your house decorated for the holidays, Hanukkah or Christmas or whatever it happens to be, then we could have the photos ready to go and maybe we could soft market it. What do you mean by soft market it? Well, we can let people know that it's coming on the market. I know, check with your MLS rules and regulations because they're different in different areas. And here's the question. If someone out there was really interested in a home right now, they happen to be in town and we could maybe arrange a convenient time for them to see the home, would that at all interest you? Again, they may say yes, they may say no. If they say no, I would at least close for the photography, because if you get the photography out of the way, then most likely you can work your way into the opportunity to market it just a little bit. One thing also it's true, and I want you to think about this. For example, in our lives, my wife and I, so we just got back from Mexico for Thanksgiving. We do that about every year or so, and as I shared on these Zoom calls before, where Gary Keller says now is a good time for sellers to sell and get their money off the table, even if it's from an investment property or even a home. And so my wife has done that, has sold her house in Scottsdale, has a secondary home she bought for an investment / temporary hold spot. Well, anyway, things can change very rapidly. Now, I have a home here in Florida. That's where I'm calling you or zooming from now. During our time in Mexico, an agent that works in her market center sent her a house that is kind of, was interesting to her. And, she went from, I'm okay about, staying in this temporary house until the conversation with me and the family was there. It went up very quickly. Listen, it is very true. Now, again, you're a potential listing agent. You're talking to a potential seller. Isn't it true that maybe during the holidays, people will get together, they are slowing down a little bit. This was the case for my wife, and she starts looking at this house, her kids are there, and all of a sudden her interest went from a 2 to about a 10. Well, she had the motivation. I mean, she really wanted a bigger home. She just wasn't motivated from a timing standpoint. She had the money or the availability to get financed. So it's just a question of stopping long enough to focus. So when you have a conversation with a potential seller, you can use that as a story. People will be talking, having conversations, in spite of certain rules in certain states won't allow you to maybe congregate. I can just tell you from my wife's standpoint, when she left Mexico yesterday, she flew into Arizona, landed, dropped off her suitcases, and immediately went take a look at that house. And I'm not sure exactly where it's going yet. Haven't had a chance to talk to her. However, that's the type of buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we would be looking for. Somebody who happens to basically mature right at the right time. If that buyer were available and would give you the number that you needed on your house, would you want that buyer to have the opportunity to buy your house? Let's switch it just a little bit, and I'll see here if there's any, put in the comments. I'll just check it from time to time. If you're a buyer, well, if you're a buyer, what might a buyer want? Why would a buyer maybe want to wait during the holidays? Do you think when you look at the situation from a buyer standpoint or a seller standpoint, at least I can basically understand why a seller may want to wait because of company coming over and their house is decorated. Why might a buyer want to wait? Well, company coming over, they're traveling, they may not want to bother a seller, et cetera, et cetera. So what avenue would you go down, basically, if you're dealing with a buyer right now, to at least have them in the market? I've said many times before, and it's worth writing down, you guys cannot win in any market unless you're in the market. So I'm assuming I'm having a conversation with you as a buyer now, and you're saying, hey, you know what? We've been looking at houses for the last week or two, and we just want to focus on the holidays right now, and got family coming over, got gifts to buy, and I don't want to put any sellers out, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you do with that? Well, you might want to follow the formula, right? Acknowledge, isolate, answer, and close. Or at least, attempt to close, ask the closing question. So I would say, I understand what you're saying. So you had mentioned, you want to, so if I'm hearing you right, you want to put your buying activity on hold until after the holidays. Again, get clarity. What does the holidays mean? So are you saying you want to wait until after Christmas, after New Year's, after 4th of July? What do you mean by holidays? Yeah, Danny, can we just put it on hold until maybe first of the year? No problem. We can certainly do that. Now, let's just talk a little bit. Can they do that? Absolutely. Can it, is there a potential downside of them doing that? So if the advanced people, go ahead and put something in the comments right there. What would be the potential downside of somebody wanting to wait? Remember, selling a house or buying a house isn't really the fun process. The benefit is the benefit of selling and buying, moving into something new, something bigger, something smaller, or moving into somewhere else. There's a motivation for people wanting to move, not the process itself, right? So what would be a downside for them potentially waiting? Yes, okay, you guys got here. Yeah, COVID-19, there are less buyers, so less competition. Sellers are serious. Perfect. So understand. So you guys are right on that. So I guess let me ask you this question, and write this down, because this is the logic you use for the buyer seller. When in the calendar year probably has the highest concentration of serious sellers or serious buyers in the market? I know you probably already can guess that. However, if that question was on a real estate exam, I wonder if people would answer probably between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Because if there's somebody in the market between Thanksgiving and Christmas, they probably are serious and more motivated. So the comment to the potential buyer would be, say, all right, so I understand you want to wait until after the 1st of January. We can do that. However, let me ask you this question. And I'm going to stop here a second and cringe when I say this, because there's a better word. This is almost what came to my mind, and I'm training myself not to say it. I want to train you guys not to say it as well. if the perfect home came available.
No,
Well, what's wrong with that? I mean,
Moderna.
I'm setting them up for failure because I'm saying perfect. So probably thinking about it just a nanosecond and wanting to teach this the right way to you. Let me ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if just the awesome home, something you guys are really liking, you know, in the nice neighborhood, had everything you wanted, became available between now and the first of the year, and the sellers were serious about selling and motivated to sell, it was just going to be like, I almost said perfect again. I'm doing my best not to say perfect. It would be just the right house for you. Now that would work, right? Just don't say perfect. What's the question? Would you want to know about it? Now, what's interesting is this. You've heard me do this before. Sometimes we can have a little bit of fun, right? A little bit of tongue in cheek with folks, particularly if you got the right relationship with them and you ask them if they say, no, I really don't want to know about it. So sometimes you have to go to the extreme. And particularly if you got the relationship, and again, you can almost ask anything you want to ask if you ask it with a smile and you're really wanting to know, because this could come back to bite you unless you have this conversation. So are you saying, I'm going to pretend like I'm talking to you, Al. Al, are you saying then basically that special home, there's another word you can say instead of perfect, if that special home became available and the seller basically was going to sell it at half price, are you instructing me not to let you know about it? Now, that kind of pins them in. Again, many times in the script class, I compare my level of questioning with a chess match, because now you're moving pieces. Not every piece you move is going to be a solid home run move. You are setting up your chessboard, right? So when you say that, they're going to say, what? They might say, absolutely not. I don't want to be bothered. This is a family holiday. You know what? You get it. They kind of made their point. However, I would say more people would say, well, I mean, what's the probability of that happen? Yeah, Denny, if it was a super duper deal and a deal of the lifetime, yeah, you could let me know. So if you get that crack in the door, they give you that much daylight. Are they in the market or out of the market? The important thing is you've led them to a position in their mind and in your communication that they're still in the market. So then you're going to get some clarity. Okay, so Al, I'll look for that home. And so if I see something that I don't know about, you know, buy one, get one free or half off, if I find that special home that I think is going to be special to you, then do I have your permission to let you know about it? By you taking them down that path, I say, listen, that awesome home, that really special home becomes available and they give you permission to follow up. And then you do follow up with meaningful information. You don't hit them every other hour with a new listing. Don't put them on some sort of crazy drip program. Now you have permission to follow up during the period in which they told you, hey, look, we're going to take a break between now and the 1st of January. Everything will be cool. Do you see how that might be a win? It works the same way for buyers. It works the same way for sellers. Again, write this down and memorize this. You cannot win in any market unless you're in any market. So any comments on that? Great. I appreciate your input on the chat. And for the life of me, I'm going to attempt one more thing here. Speakers. I don't know if that makes it any better or not. I trust you can still hear me. So there's that. Now we've got people all over the country, and being in Mexico for the last week, of course, airlines make you wear masks. Mexico, they make you wear masks. You know, I see people driving on the road with masks. I'm just sensing, again, I've been out of the country for a week and I'm not really watching a lot of news, that the level of conversation around COVID is starting to increase. So I'm in Florida, pretty open state. I mean, nothing's closed. Masks are not mandated by the government. I mean, all businesses are open. What was interesting when I was landing into Dallas, I would be looking down and you could tell there's a Walmart there, a lot of people out shopping. I think there are a lot of people out shopping. However, I'm a little bit concerned. There seems to be the cases number go up. The fear seems to be increasing. And if Joe Biden gets certified and inaugurated as president, I don't know. I mean, there's some talk about mandatory shutdowns, et cetera. So let's talk in terms of that. I don't have a crystal ball, and regardless of your politics, whatever happens will happen and we'll have to deal with it. And let's talk in terms of someone wanting to, let's just talk about the COVID thing again. Now, we've been through there before, back in March, April, May, June. Then it kind of, the market obviously has been going crazy. We're still having pretty good numbers, pretty good traffic. What do you think is going to happen next? So going back to the class that I've taught on shadow sellers, do you think there are maybe some other sellers that maybe are becoming a little bit more concerned? I think basically this is Jaws 2, right? I think we're going to go back and relive this in another cycle. And what will be interesting is if there is, let's talk in terms of what if there's a mandatory shutdown from a government standpoint, what will it do to our market? I had a call today. Every year I teach a class, or actually I speak at a conference called Market Watch, where I talk about the residential market here in Southwest Florida, what's gone on in 2020 and what I expect to happen in 2021. We're not seeing any slowdown yet. Now, I know Gary Keller actually came on and had a mastermind last week. I heard part of it when I was out walking with my wife. And I know the government's supposed to have kind of some stimulus. Maybe they're going to work on, maybe when they get that worked out. Here's my 1,000-foot view. And I'm going to talk about our market right now. And again, we can extrapolate this to your particular market. Interest rates are still pretty attractive. The unemployment rate is not bad. I don't see in our area any shutdown of the real estate market, at least in Florida or open states. And I know this could be a little bit like self-fulfilling prophecy, because I live in Southwest Florida. I'm finding a lot of people that live in urban areas are attempting to move to the suburbs. People that live in the north, our snowbirds, are leaving the suburbs because they can sell their homes for more money now and come south, which is their dream. We have a pretty good value proposition for folks. So I don't think the market's going to go to dust. I don't think it's going to get crazy bad or anything. I still think it's going to be good. I think Gary even says he's expecting it to move forward on a positive nature, probably for 2021. So if you have a different opinion, it's okay. I get that. However, that's just what I'm feeling right now. And if that's the case, let's just take that as a given for a second and let's talk about this, because you're going to have buyers and sellers coming from the emotion called uncertainty or fear, and buyers or sellers are going to want to wait. We've been through this before. Let's have the conversation. All right. So if you have a seller now becoming a little bit more concerned about COVID, you follow the model. What does that mean? So find out what that means. And what does concern for COVID mean? Then you would isolate, other than COVID and the things you just mentioned, is there any other reason why you wouldn't move forward today? And let's just say if they list more than one, then the model is that which one is most important to you. I guess what I want you to kind of get through in your mind is, because most of you out there listening to this work with both buyers and sellers. And where do you think the risk really lies right now? Do you think sellers, the market has been moving steadily forward at probably a pretty nice pace, at least since probably July. So we're on our 5th month and we don't see any slowdown yet, coming into our 6th month of a good market. I think the momentum's still on the seller's side. So if a seller wanted to take their house off the market because of the rise in COVID cases, then the pain point for them would be what? I want to take it off because of COVID. Other than that, no, just because of COVID. So let me ask you then, tell me what your concern is. Well, I don't want people walking through my house and I've got somebody high risk in my home. I understand that, certainly understand that. Let me ask you the question. What would be the crazy question you could ask? Listen, when you want to start, if you want to triangulate someone in an argument, and I don't mean an argument like a fighting argument, I'm talking about a verbal dialogue. One of the things you want to do is where's their boundary? So you're saying, I don't want people coming into my house in this COVID environment. The boundary question would be, well, what if no one had to come into your house? Would you be okay with that? And if they would say yes, and again, don't forget their motivation. They want to go bigger, they want to go smaller, or they want to go north, they want to go south. If they would say okay with that, now the only thing we have to do is to quantify what that would look like. So in their minds, remember, in their minds, when they have their home on the market, what is their frame of reference? It's not over the last 6 or 12 months. We do this every day. It may be 6 or 12 years since they sold a house. Oh, we have a broker tour, we have lasagna, and we have all the brokers come by, and then we have an open house and all these people are coming through. That's their perception, you guys. So you just answer it. You just ask them the question. If no one would if no one had to walk through, would that be okay? Now, if they said no to that, and they could say no, that would be a very interesting conversation. Are you saying basically if you could get top dollar in this white hot market, you could put all that money in your home, in your pocket, so you can get to San Antonio to be with your family, you would say no to that? And there's people that, no, I just don't want anybody through my home. Okay. Now, would that be rational? Not 100%. And you know where I go with that, and you can type something in the chat here. Does anybody remember a question I would ask a seller that had super concerned about people coming into their home? There's a particular direction you want to go with this, and I'll give you a second to type it in there. One of the questions I'll ask a potential seller is, well, let me ask you, I totally understand that. And let's say that we can minimize, there'd be no one through your home. Would you consider it if no one was walking through your home? I just don't feel comfortable in my home. All right, now we got them at that point. Here's the question. I would ask them simply, well, let me ask you this. Do you go to the grocery store? Now, there's some people that don't. My wife doesn't go generally anyway. She goes to Amazon, right? And she needs Tide detergent. She goes to Amazon. The only thing she doesn't get from Amazon is ice, and they just don't get it there fast enough, right? However, if they go to the grocery store, what does that mean? If they go to Walgreens, what does that mean? If they happen to go and because they're driving their car and go get gas, what does that mean? What you're attempting to do in a very sensitive and concerning environment is this. Is there a risk when you go to the grocery store? Yes. Walgreens, yes. Gas station. Anytime you go outside the house where there's other people interacting, in spite of a mask, in spite of social distancing, there is a risk. And so I point out the fact that, well, let me ask you then, if you're going in those areas, is there a risk in coming into contact that maybe has or had the virus? They have to admit yes. There's no way to eliminate any risk. Can you run from your house to the bank? That in my case here, I just go out of the gate and it's right there. So it's probably 0.3 of a mile away. There's no guarantee I won't get into a fender bender between here and there, right? So yes, there's a risk. So what I'm hearing you say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is that you are okay with a measured level of risk, one that you find acceptable. Again, I'm not being judgmental, because I want them to be in their comfort zone within an acceptable risk. And I'm attempting by that question is to lead them to the next question then. If some level of whatever standard you set up of acceptable risk is available to you as a home seller, would it be worth entertaining a conversation how that would work? Because let me ask you, in this particular market, do you feel there's sellers out there that are a little bit concerned like you are, and they're taking their home off the market, not letting buyers sue because of their concern? Now, do you have a little deja vu coming back? Because now we're going back to the shadow seller, and why there's 7 reasons why sellers should be on the market now. And so what's interesting, and I wanted to point out, I don't have to go through all those 7. You can go to the Denny Grimes Mastermind, and all the slides are there. The 7 reasons why sellers should be on the market now. What's going on now as we get towards the end of the year? 2 things are taking place. Number 1, there's going to be buyers and sellers that want to kind of wait because of the holidays. We talked about that just a little bit, 15 minutes or so. COVID numbers are coming back up. There'll be buyers and sellers that want to wait because of that. Again, from a seller standpoint, we're going right back into what we've been studying for the last 3 or 4 months. So it's just a review, 7 reasons why a seller should be on the market now. Now for a quick review, let's talk in terms of what should be going through the buyer's mind. And that is, well, if you're a buyer, I don't want to be going through a potential seller's house because, I have health risk. I've got my mother-in-law living with me, etc., whatever it might be. Why should a buyer be taking the risk? Well, go back to the very beginning of COVID. We had what we call, just as a review, a side effect script. That's what we called it. So let's just say, Al, I'm talking to you again. Okay. I love this role play because you can't even talk back to me. So Al, you're a buyer. And so I understand how you feel. Other than the risk of going into someone's house, is there any other reason you wouldn't be moving forward today? Whatever it happens to be, let's just assume they're concerned. They want to wait till the COVID's over. Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because when will COVID be over? When will the flu be over? When will measles be over? I don't know. I mean, how about shingles? I mean, we do all these vaccines. It's still out there, right? So let's just assume that's their major concern. Well, the side effect script goes like this. And Al, probably if I had you on and others, and I'm not looking because I don't want you to see the top of my head. I'm doing my best to look at you guys and talk to you guys right now. Is if a doctor gave you a new prescription, one you hadn't had before, Al, would you want the doctor to take a few minutes and explain the potential side effects of that before you took the pill? Now, again, many questions are designed for the rational. And again, you talk about the bell-shaped curve, right? The rational people are in the middle. The rational people is in the rational section of the curve is where you make your money. You don't make it in the outlying areas. So a rational person would say yes. All right, then. Well, then I'm not your doctor. I'm just a real estate professional. So do you mind if I share with you? Notice it's a question, not a statement. The potential is the key word there, because I don't know what side effects are going to take place. The potential side effects of you not stepping into the market now. And then it sounds a little bit like the 7 reasons why sellers should be in the market. There's about 4 reasons why buyers should be in the market now. Really quickly, for those that haven't heard this before, Al, number 1, let me ask you, you're a buyer, you're concerned, so you might want to wait. We just kind of went over that. Let me ask you, do you feel like there may be other buyers out there that feel the same way? Logical answer, yes. Awesome. So if you happen to be if you got to the point where you felt comfortable, notice I'm not saying if I made you feel comfortable, because what I make them do has no bearing on it. If you felt comfortable finding a way to stay in this market and those other buyers were out of the market, would that work in your favor or against you? Oh, it would probably work in my favor because less competition, right? Awesome. Step 2. Well, if our buyers feel that way and step out of the market, sellers are people too, right? And so you think that maybe some sellers out there will take their homes off the market because they're a little concerned of COVID. Now stop right there. This sounds like it's going to be a disadvantage for the buyer. It's not. Follow me on this. Don't miss this point. Because you might be thinking, well, yeah, those sellers that take their house off the market, that means there's lower inventory. It's not good for a buyer. That's not where I'm going. So if those sellers basically take their house off the market, then the only sellers that are left in the marketplace right now are serious and motivated. Does that work in your favor or work against you? Well, that would work in my favor, I guess. And so do you think that they might have some concerns about COVID, and they would be concerned about the number of people coming through their home, and they'll probably find a way to mitigate that, right? Same as you. All right. So now we've got two reasons why a buyer should be in the market right now. And the same level of questions go. I mean, do you go to the store? Do you go to Publix? Do you go to the drugstore? Do you get gas? Do you take your kids to school? Etc. All those things, if they still do it, there's a level of risk. And so the bottom line is, I guess there's an acceptable level of risk. If we can proceed forward with what you define as a acceptable level of risk, would you be interested in at least keeping a hook in the water? Because what if, let me ask you this, what if that special home was out there? Maybe it just came on the market. You got less buyers looking, so that's in your favor. This seller is serious and motivated because they need to get somewhere. And if that was out there, would you at least want me to let you know about it? Now we're going down the same path, right? You're getting permission to follow up with them. Same script, same concept, same logic as the holiday script, only it has to do with COVID. Those are the two main types of seasonal type of objections you're probably going to receive. And I trust that I've given you a roadmap on both of them of why they should be in the market, how you might dissect that in a level of questioning that would make them feel comfortable of moving forward in the marketplace. So why don't you take a second right now, jot something down. We've got more time. I have some other things to cover. I just wanted to make sure I covered that. So we've got about 15 minutes left. What objection, questions, ahas do you have with that? Or how do you have any recommendations how I use the last 15 or 20 minutes for role play or anything else you might be dealing with? So just forgive me for a second. I'll look at the chat. Okay. All right, William, when your house is going to be shown, then the best thing that you can do is open all the doors. Yeah, which keeps your house from touching anything. Yes, right. You can make the sellers feel safe about that. Anything else you want to add, you guys? All right, I'll let you still have time to add some things. Anyone want to take a wild guess at probably right now, other than what I've talked about from a buyer standpoint? There's going to be another objection that would be anticipated from a potential buyer. Anyone want to take a wild guess what that one might be? And when you look at the two sides of the transactions, the buyer and seller, I believe there's going to be more objections from the buyers right now than sellers. What do you think that objection would be? Somebody type it in there real quick, and I bet you guys can come up with it. Now this is kind of like, do you feel affordability would become a factor? Al, you actually typed that money. Yeah, there you go. Prices are too high. Now you're getting it. Right. So you guys are getting that and you're probably getting it out there in the field. So let's talk about that, because I think that's going to be something you're going to be faced with, meaning it's been seller's market, and prices are going up. Things are selling fast. Sooner or later, the market has to turn. So break it down, isolate, acknowledge, isolate, etc. So let's see. I've been picking on Al. I am going to pick on Linda. All right. I'm going to pick on you. So Linda, you're a buyer out there in the marketplace. And well, let me start from a different standpoint. Just as a review, I love the best motivation question I know of, you guys, is the 1 to 10. So Linda, let me ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning you just started looking, and 10 means if you found the right house today, you'd buy it. Where do you find yourself on that scale? What's interesting is that is a very good question to use early on in your contact. For example, I like to even begin it. Let me just redo this and give you the first few words. You might, Linda, have called in on a sign, a Facebook lead. The Facebook leads really we're discovering, and we've talked about this before, are people that are generally, don't assume it to be always the case, generally kind of earlier in the search than somebody walking through an open house. So I would soften that statement by saying, hey, listen, so I can mirror your motivation, meaning, and sometimes I'll even say this, meaning if you're like 6 months or 12 months away, you don't want an agent calling you every other hour, correct? However, I find that people that are ready to come in, I mean, they're getting closer to making that decision. They appreciate our input more often. So I can mirror your motivation, Linda, on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 meaning you just kind of started, and 10 means if you found the right house, that right house knows, I didn't say perfect, that right house today, you'd buy it. Where do you find yourself on that scale? And here is the thing, guys. I don't know what you're rooting for. It doesn't really matter. So if I were a buyer's agent, I would trust that it would at least be a 5. I mean, a 3. It doesn't really matter, though. It doesn't matter what they say. The next question is the important one. So Linda, let's say you're a 6. Awesome. There's the acknowledgement. Let me ask you, what would it take to get you to a 10? Here's where you're unpacking, right? You're gonna isolate. What would it take to get you to a 10? What's the number one thing you're gonna sell? I mean, say, well, I got to find the right house, right? You get that. All right. And you're making a list. What else has to happen? What you want to, well, I guess I'd have to get pre-approved. Okay. What else? Well, I'm waiting on a promotion at work, and I have to have that go through. Okay. What else has to happen? Well, I have to sell my house. Ooh, there's a big one, right? So whatever it is you get all that on the table. That is one of the best ways to get an idea of what basically, from a motivation standpoint. So there's the 1 to 10. So now let's go forward, Linda. Okay, so we have determined that you wanted to, your family's growing. You're going to have your mother-in-law move in. You're actually doing some homeschooling, so you need a bigger home. There's your motivation. So right now you're in a smaller home, etc. That's your motivation, let's assume. So let me ask you, other than the price of the homes going up, is there anything else that would keep you from moving forward? Now, what's interesting, forget about what they say. They say 3 or 4 different things. We'll cover one at a time here because I can't really role play. You're going to isolate it. It has to do with the market moving up. This is exactly the mirror image, guys, of a seller, which is the number one objection that I have agents tell me from across the country. The number one objection sellers have about selling their house right now is stepping into the market, not having a home to buy, or the fact that prices are going up, right? So in this case, Linda's renting a home. She doesn't have a home to sell, and she doesn't want to step into the market when the houses are going up. Well, if you want to ask an out of the box question, a question would be, well, let me ask you this. Now she's renting, right? A question could be, okay, so how long are you willing to wait for the market to change directions? Now that would be a very interesting answer. I've heard even in role plays, what are they going to say? I mean, let's say she's been renting. Let's say she's been renting for 5 years. Now they want to step into the market. Interest rates are favorable. However, prices are going up. What would be a way that you would handle that? So how long are you willing to wait, Linda? What would be a reasonable answer? Well, let's go 6 months or 12 months. Okay. So let me ask you then, what happens if 6 or 12 months from now, the prices are still going up? Then what? Well, then I guess I'll wait until they don't. Okay, then go back to the same question. Linda, how long are you willing to wait? At some point in time, it's like they're going to have to make a decision like, I don't know. I promise you this. I promise you this. In their minds, they're thinking the time they have to wait is much shorter than it really is. And we don't have a crystal ball. However, here's what I know. Regardless if Linda happens to be renting a house for the last 5 years or owning a house for the last 5 years, and maybe they have a home to sell, This is an easy one. I'm going to start there I'm talking to Linda, the seller, because Linda has to sell first before she buys. I see, Linda. So would you rather wait till the market's going down? So when you sell your house, you can sell your house for less, so you can buy for less, right? And that's a big fat no. So now let's just deal with the renter. The renter is in a perfect scenario to time the market, right? However, Linda, you've been renting for 5 years now, correct? Let me ask you, if you could have bought 5 years ago instead of today, which would have been better for you? Now you're making them process, because I can go back 10 years because I track the market, and this is really true probably where you are too. The market has been going up steadily for 8 or 10 years. So anyone who's been sitting on the fence for the last 8 or 10 years would have been much better to buy 8 or 10 years ago, or 9 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, or last year. Get this, Linda, let me ask you this. Prices right now are up about 18%. If you'd have bought in January of this year versus now, you would have saved 18%. Now, do you wish you could have a mulligan and do it over again? If you could do it over again in January, would you have bought then instead of now? Most likely, yes. So my question then to you is, you can buy now and you can lock in a price right now. And by the way, how long do you plan on living there? Well, we'll be here 10 years or so. Well, if it's really going to be 10 years, does it really matter what kind of minor fluctuations up or down they happen to happen over the next 10 years? However, let me ask you, if you were to wait right now and wait for the market 6 or 12 months from now, and the house would be worth 3, 5, 8% more, would you feel good about that decision or not? Because now you've just basically cost yourself 5 to 8, 10%, and you're still faced with a decision. I want to wait till the market's better. The bottom line is, how long are you willing to wait? And of course, as you know, I happened to call someone today about refinancing my house, which is really kind of silly. I mean, I've been on these calls with you for like 6 months, and I had a 4.5% interest rate on my mortgage on my house and never even thought about refinancing. It's down to 2.75 on a refi. So, I mean, it's pretty attractive. So for buyers who are wanting to wait, one of the strongest questions you can ask them is, how long are you willing to wait? And whatever they say, again, don't fill in the blanks. I'll wait a year. All right. Now, okay, so what if you're wrong? If you're wrong, actually a better question would be, if the market continues at the same pace right now over the next 12 months, how much more will you be paying for the same home? 12%, 10%, whatever. So let me ask you then, do you feel your buying power is getting bigger or smaller every day you wake up? So a year from now, if the market, they're playing craps. I don't know if you've ever gone to Vegas and played craps. Kind of a fun game, pretty complicated, fun to watch. You can play the points, or you can play against the shooter who's rolling the dice that they're going to throw a 7 or 11. The odds of throwing a 7 or 11 are greater than probably hitting the point. That's why the house wins, right? So they're betting that the market's not going to improve, when basically the track record for the last 8 to 10 years has been going up, and it's showing no signs of letting up. So how long are they willing to wait? And again, if you factor in how long they're going to be owning the house, they're not buying in, not buying to flip it right away, I trust you'll be able to get them off the dime. So that is that. And I have here, let's see what I've got here. Last 10 minutes, lack of inventory. I love that. Gosh darn, I wish I could talk to you. So let's just do the lack of inventory. That would be probably the second one. I think that's a very, very good point. And I'll give you props. Oh, that was Al. All right, so Al, you've been doing role plays all day with me. Lack of inventory is a concern. I love this because it really is pretty simple. In fact, I even had my wife use this the other day. When we were role playing this a week or two ago, when you're dealing with a seller that wants to buy but has to sell first, the question I want you just to be honest with yourself, if you got somebody that has a house to sell and they want to buy, and they can't buy without selling, are they a buyer or a seller? They're a seller because they can't be a buyer until they sell. Listen, I was going to say you can't be both. Let's look at the other side of that. There's people out there that have a house to sell and they want to buy another house. They can be a buyer without selling. So what are they? I'm just going to make a statement and we'll chew on this. You could say both. I would say both doesn't exist because there's an advantage to being one and not both. Let's take the example where I have a home right now. My wife is in this category. Many people are within reason. She can buy a house without selling her house. Well, the advantage to that is, let me ask you, going to lack of inventory. Is lack of inventory a concern with a seller who is a buyer that does not have to sell? That would be a big fat no. Lack of inventory is helping the seller on their sale. However, guess what? They are a buyer. You put them into your follow-up, your drips or whatever, and when the right house comes along, they can buy it. So lack of inventory is not a challenge for somebody who basically is a seller who has a home to sell, however, can buy because they can just take their time. The challenge might be somebody that has a home to sell and lack of inventory in their mind is a challenge. However, it's not really a challenge because of why? They are not a buyer, they're a seller. They can't be a buyer until they sell. And once they sell, they become a buyer. So again, in that scenario, what you have to help, we must, I don't like to say have. Somehow we have to communicate that message to them because they think they're a buyer and aren't. So then you have to focus on one side of the equation or the other. Well, they only have one side to focus on. So when you find lack of inventory, I have to sell, L. Listen, there's the house that just has a special house over there in Tanglewood. I want that house. Can you buy it without selling? No. What are you going to do? In their minds, they're going to put a deposit down on it. They're going to do a contingency. Subject to selling my house. That's not going to work. I mean, for a seller to take that kind of deal, that means they have a home that's overpriced. That's the only way they can get rid of it, right? So then if we're going to be professional agents, we have to then help them understand they are a seller. And as I said earlier in this call, I just want to remind you now, if a seller does not like that position because they want to get upsize, downsize or whatever, I have to sell first. I don't want to sell because I can't find the house out there I want. There's a lack of inventory. Okay, let's stop right here and analyze this. What's their choice? They can wait till the right house comes along. However, if they have to sell, unlike the seller who doesn't have to sell, can they buy it? No. Why? Because they're a seller. However, if they had their home sold, could they act on that one? Yes, because now they're a buyer. The wrinkle is this, and again, this is something we've covered on this class before, and I trust, and we'll be on, I trust next week we'll be able to role play this. How do you get them from being a seller to a buyer? Number one, you have to get their home sold. Now, again, they have some concerns about where to go, and you handle that with, okay, same way we did with the COVID environment or the holiday environment. So let me ask you, Al, going back to you as a potential seller, have you seen homes come on the market that you've seen before that you've liked? Chances are they're going to say yes. If they say no, well, do you feel the house you want is out there? It's just a matter of timing. You must get them to that point because I don't know that many sellers are going to hop out of their home, their airplane without a parachute with no regards to whether or not they're going to find one. If the answer is in the affirmative, yeah, I've seen houses come and go. I can't get to them fast enough. I know, because you're a seller, you're not a buyer. So what if we could get you in a position where you could take advantage of that? Would you be interested? Well, sure. And again, my favorite quote is, how would you like your cake and eat it too? Well, what do you mean? What is that? Well, what if we can get you top dollar for your home as a seller and the buyer's willing to wait and give you, how much time would you need to feel comfortable finding your next house? You see, it's very, very simple, because you can't be a buyer if you're a seller. So I trust that helps you, because it's like, my goal is I go over these things and help you take maybe complex issues, because buyers don't think about this all the time, or they might have missed that episode on HGTV on how to get into a house when you have a house to sell, and do it in 55 minutes, including commercial breaks. I want you to have the tools in your tool belt. Again, close to the end of the year, don't let sellers sit on the fence, because it's not going to be in their best interest if that right buyer comes along. Buyers, don't let them sit on the fence, because it's not going to be in their best interest if that right seller happens to come along. And my fourth time of saying it in this particular session, you can't win in this market unless you're in this market. So I trust that's been helpful. Got a few minutes for some ahas or last minute questions. What do you have to say here? Some sellers care more about where they're moving, more in what the price they'll sell the old home. I have this year 3 cases where the seller wants to buy first. I was the stressed one after to sell the other home because they have 2 more. Oh, interesting. That's an interesting thing. Now that is a greater pain issue. Now that scenario, the seller could buy without selling. So what were they? They're a buyer. However, they didn't sell their home. Now they have 2 mortgages. So when you have a seller that can buy without selling, that would be a greater pain. So what is a greater pain? Securing the house and then carrying 2 mortgages until you can sell one. However, you got the house you really want. Or again, which is a greater pain, getting top dollar for your home today and maybe having 30, 60, 90 days to go find a house. And if you don't, you might have to step into temporary accommodations until the right home comes along. That's a greater pain question. You would ask that in a greater pain, because basically double house payments gets pretty uncomfortable after a while. That was a great point. Thank you so much for that, Sandra. Any other ahas here? Sell it and then rent back. Yeah, short-term rental. I understand. Don't make this too complicated. I know lenders get wacky sometimes about post-closing possession of rentals or whatever. Keep the details out of it, at least until you get them into the mindset of what are they, a buyer or seller. One more. Any other ahas? You had a great class today, in spite of the fact no one could talk to me. I'll figure that out. All right, well, if you want to be part of the black belt class on Thursday, if you want to 2 o'clock on Thursday, and if you don't have that link, just go to send me an email at dennydelivers@gmail.com. I'll make sure you get the link and you can participate in that. And other than that, we'll have class scripts and dialogues for C19 market again next Tuesday, 1 to 2 Eastern. Denny Grimes, be careful out there.
Thanks, Denny.
Thank you. It was awesome.